Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode number 9 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Latini Creative Solutions, who for over 20 years have had experience in design, print, and marketing, specializing in creative solutions that are going to capture your voice and deliver your message. So if you're looking to upgrade all of your company artwork and logos or make your social media pages look fantastic, Latini Creative Solutions is the place to go. From supporting and energizing your already established brand to developing your company's identity and marketing campaigns, Latini Creative Solutions provides design that is thoughtful, focused, and creatively executed. They are amazingly professional, so good at what they do, and they listen to exactly what your vision is. And if you don't have a vision, well, they can help you find one. Find Latini Creative Solutions online at latinicreative.com. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Jumptown Skydiving. Now, come on. If you have skydiving on your bucket list, there is no time like the present. Why not give your 2020 a total upgrade? You haven't really been able to do much that's been fun this year, so why not go throw yourself out of a plane? I promise you'll love it. Jumptown Skydiving was the first purposeful skydiving center in the United States. It started back in 1959. They're right in Orange, Massachusetts, located 70 miles outside of Boston, and the views out there are absolutely spectacular. Jumptown Skydiving is open Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, ready to take you over 13,000 feet in the air and throw you out of a plane. So book your tandem skydive now. Find them online at jumptown.com and come on, do something amazing. Go jump out of a plane. So before we get to this week's episode, I wanted to make sure that you heard my big announcement. I am now on Patreon. Yes, I'm already on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and my new YouTube channel. Hell, I even have a TikTok and even Cameo. But I just announced my new Patreon page. So go to patreon.com/Mistress Carrie and you can sign up for a Mistress Carrie backstage pass. Yes, you can already join me on Tuesday nights at 8:30 live on my Facebook page. And of course, you get new episodes of the Mistress Carrie podcast every Wednesday. But if you're looking for something a little more exclusive and a little more special, with some backstage access and bonus content, and even discount codes in my upcoming merch store online, well, then my Patreon page is where you need to go. So log on to patreon.com/Mistress Carrie and sign up for the Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass. Okay, episode number 9 of the Mistress Carrie podcast is something a little different. I've known all 3 of these guys for years. They all play guitar, and I thought it would be really interesting during all of this time of solitary confinement if I got 3 guitar players that played distinctly different styles of guitar from 3 different bands and get them together to have a conversation about guitar playing, inspiration, songwriting, and that barely scratches the surface. For music lovers, this episode you are going to love. And if you're a guitar player, well, this is guitar heaven. What do you get when you combine one purple-haired bitch, a member of Lamb of God, a member of Bad Wolves, and a member of Bush together? You get episode 9 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And oh yeah, the linked playlist in the description of this podcast rocks. So here we go. Episode number 9 of the Mistress Carrie podcast, featuring Traynor from Bush, Mark Morton from Lamb of God, and Coyle from Bad Wolves.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair is so lovely.
Pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown. You're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
This is Marilyn Manson, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
How are you? I feel like this is what it's like to like sit in like a bar or like hanging out backstage where we just kind of get to all chill out and talk. And you guys are scattered all over the place. So I'm so happy that we all got to make the technology work so we could all hang out and talk today.
Very cool. Thank you for the opportunity, Carrie.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's good to hang.
So Chris and Doc, you guys are on the West Coast, but Mark and I are on the East Coast, and we're all scattered everywhere. How long have you guys been home since everything kind of went into lockdown where you are? Because Doc and Chris, you guys are in Cali, right? Mark, where are you?
I'm in right outside Richmond, Virginia.
How long have you guys been all locked in the house?
I did a European tour with Five Finger Death Punch and Megadeth, literally I would say, actually I did that, and then I did this gig with a couple of guys from Metallica at the end of March, and then literally I got home that week, and maybe 5 days later everything was shut down. So I was basically playing live right up until everything went down. So it's been since March, beginning of March.
Same thing for you, Mark?
Yeah, so we had we did kind of a pre-album promo thing in Chicago at House of Vans, and that was actually on February 14th on Valentine's Day, and that's the last show we played. And yeah, I mean, I'm not physically locked. I live out in the country, so I can get out a little bit, and there's a nice park next to the house and that kind of thing. But in terms of like working, live and anything like that, it's been since mid-February since we've done anything.
Chris, you're the last concert that I saw.
On Saturday?
When I saw you in Vegas at the end of February. After WAF went off the air, the next week I went to that big rock radio convention in Vegas, and I saw you guys at the House of Blues in Vegas. And I feel like I would have savored it even more if I had known it was going to be the last rock concert I saw for the entire year in person.
I mean, it felt weird there too, right? Though, like the whole vibe of everything was like we were kind of wondering what was going to go on. We were about to leave for Australia, and all my gear left, like my clothes and stuff. And then they were like, you're not going. So since I think it was like, when did they shut it down here? Like March 12th or something like that. Like I've been in Topanga up until last week. I live in the Santa Monica mountain range. I hadn't been out more than like 3 times. I was just like, so I forgot almost, because I have a studio and I was working. I almost forgot all this craziness was going on, except when you go out to get gas or like groceries and people like staring at each other. Like nobody really knows how to interact with each other in the grocery store.
I remember that first day. I felt like after the NBA shut down and NHL and all that stuff, my girlfriend she works at the Palladium in Hollywood, and she was supposed to work this Animals as Leaders Dance Gavin Dance show. She was literally like dressed for work, and they like canceled the show, and she hasn't worked since. And I remember going to the supermarket the next day, and you guys ever see that movie The Mist?
No.
Stephen King. It's like basically it's like this crazy mist comes over the town, and there's like monsters in there, but everyone's stuck in a supermarket, and then like it turns into like Lord of the Flies. Like that was like the look. Like you were just like, yo, this could get crazy at any moment. People start, starting tribes and killing the weak and old. And
as weird as things are now, and they're weird, and like I think even it's evolved into new layers and areas of weirdness. But there are things that I will do now that I wouldn't have done those first few weeks when everything locked down, because I just didn't know how to be. You know what I mean? I was full on at first, like I'm not going anywhere. I went and bought like, bags of dried beans and rice and stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's gonna be, like it's like we're really gonna be like, I don't know, some kind of like no one's going outside for a year. But it took, I'm sure for everyone, it took for me like a sort of process of feeling out like, what am I comfortable doing? What am I comfortable not doing? And kind of like determining my behavior in this new landscape.
I've been made fun of for years because I've been a zombie prepper for years. Yeah. And not afraid of like real zombies, but talking about like a big illness or a massive power outage. I mean, up here in New England, we get all the extreme weather. We get the hurricanes and the blizzards and all of that stuff. So it's like you always kind of have to be prepared for that kind of stuff. We're hardy people up here in the Northeast, right? So all of a sudden, my friends that used to make fun of me all the time for being a doomsday prepper are all of a sudden calling me for advice on stuff like, what should I be stockpiling? And is there anything? And the one thing that took me by surprise was the fucking toilet paper. I did not see a run on toilet paper coming. And I'm like, out of anything you're worried about stockpiling, that's what people are worried about? Like, you can wipe your ass with almost anything.
Yeah.
You sure about that?
If it's a difference between like stockpiling more non-perishable food or just having all the toilet paper, like there's leaves all over the place. Like you can wipe your ass with newspaper. You can't eat newspaper.
You got running water still, you're pretty good.
You can eat newspaper.
Doc's so worried about his butthole right now. He's like, I like the good paper, man.
Well, no, here's the thing about the toilet. Here's the thing about the toilet paper is like, you don't need it until there's none in the store. And then you're like, oh, I really need it.
Well, I joke all the time that as you get older, there are certain things that you are okay and understand the value of and you pay top dollar for. For example, you don't mind spending good money on really good sheets. Mm-hmm. You don't mind spending good money on a good pillow and a good mattress, good socks. If you're a drinker, to spend money on good wine and good booze. And you find yourself not buying generic toilet paper anymore. Like you buy there's a little extravagances that you buy the good stuff.
Yeah, certain things you go name brand. Saran wrap. I go name brand on Saran wrap. I don't know why, but just do. Toilet paper's probably on that list too.
My girlfriend and I were like, should we get a bidet? Like when there was that run on toilet paper, I was like, maybe we should get a bidet.
One of those Japanese toilets, man, that when like the first time I went to Japan, and you get the super Star Trek toilet, I was like, God, I gotta get one of these in my house, man.
One of the ones that makes a noise while you're going, so it's not embarrassing.
Oh, is that what that's for? I never realized that's what that's for. But it's got the temperature control for the squirt you get and all that, and all those it's dope. I still want. I haven't got one yet, but I want to get one.
It's like sticking your butt out of the car in one of those automatic car washes. Like you're clean when you get done.
I'm glad we could all get together, you guys.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Mistress Carrie podcast, right?
Is this going out live?
But the reason why I bring these things up is because there's such isolation now. And especially with the musicians that I know, you guys are so used to a nomadic lifestyle. You're so used to never being home. And so, A, you've been spending so much time at home, which is unprecedented for the career that you have. But B, the creature comforts that really do mean something are the things that you guys do take with you when you travel. So what are some of those things when you were traveling all the time that you were like, oh, I'm bringing this with me because I need that little bit of home or that little creature comfort with me?
I bring my yoga mat. But that's not a creature comfort. That's just I have a serious back issue, so I have to work out, or else I'll put myself in a definitely position of issues. And I bring lots of, Mark can attest to this. Actually, when I toured with Mark, I didn't bring that many shoes. I think I only brought a couple pairs, but what bad was I literally will have like 10 pairs of Jordans.
You don't collect them as you go? I would feel like being on tour would be a good place to like get shoes.
I'll always buy, every tour, I'm not really in Europe per se, because I just don't want to have too much stuff, but on a US tour, I'm sure I'll buy at least 2 pairs on a tour.
Yeah. I don't bring anything. I've never found a way to tour and feel like I was particularly comfortable, which is odd because I've been touring professionally for almost 2 decades now. But it's like I will pack a suitcase and I invariably wear like, 3 t-shirts and 2 pair of pants, and I'll just send them out, because we send laundry out every day, like our organization does. So I'll just like, and I'm the cat, like these guys probably have like cool stage clothes and stuff. Like I literally wear what I was wearing that day and I walk on stage, and that's how I play. And then I'll take that off wet and put it in the laundry pile and put something on just like it on. And that'll be what I wear on stage the next day.
You've been wearing the same camo shorts for 63 years.
Yeah, right. The same plain black. I have like 5 plain black t-shirts. And I don't read particularly often. I don't have any I've never found it's weird on tour for me. I'm just like I still don't know what to do.
I have a whole different lifestyle. Am I the only one in the group that has a bag still packed in the back of my car? Like I always have a bag packed. So
I have my toiletry bag like always ready to go.
I still haven't gotten out of the suitcase mode, even though this is the first time I've spent July at home in 12 years.
Wow.
So we have in our storage space like stuff that we only use for tours. So I bought like a coffee maker. So I have like a whole different lifestyle and like wardrobe at home than I do like on tour. And I just keep a tour pillow somewhere. I have a back roller, an amazing one. I'll show it to you.
I bring a back roller. I bring the foam roller.
Because guitarists, I think people don't.
Pro, man.
No,
guitarists are always hunched forward, and like we end up having pretty bad backs because we're always like hunched over all day long, nerding out on the guitar, hurting our backs.
Leaning neck over. Like I noticed this, my neck starts. Like I never had neck problems till like 2 years ago, but I noticed just from like leaning down and looking at your fretboards and your hands just for long periods of time, just that little neck bend.
Yeah, it's not natural.
Lately. Yeah.
My chiropractor actually came to see us play when we played out. I can't remember what venue it was. We played out here. And he said, 30 seconds into it, I know why you have back problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there advice that you would give all of your younger selves when you became musicians and guitar players to protect your health now? Like, do you wish that you had taken better care of your back and your neck way back in the day?
No way. I wouldn't change anything.
I would because I think the thing with back health, it's just this thing you don't realize you are healthy until you're not. And so like all the things I do now to deal with it, if I would have I never did real core strength workouts when I was 22 years old, but if I had developed that and kind of been a little more wary, but me, I never had long hair, so like when I would rock out on stage, I'd be using my entire body in these really raucous ways, and so it's just you're sleeping in vans, you're sleeping on floors, you take all those and then compress that into 10 years of touring, and it just it added up. Like people are like, oh, your back hurts, you must be getting old. It's like, dude, my back went out when I was 26 years old. The age is a factor, but it's like I was jacked up even when I was younger. So
I always thought it was really interesting. Like you go back and you look at that old footage of like Jason Newsted and Metallica because of the long hair. I just want to know how he gets out of bed today.
He might be fucked up. Who knows?
He might be. Yeah, he might have trouble. I don't know.
He's a sweetheart.
Oh, he's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
I haven't met him. I want to.
I did this.
Go ahead.
I did this festival with Gavin, the Bridge Festival for Neil Young, and my girlfriend, who we have a kid together, and we didn't have anybody to watch her. So I have to bring my daughter to gigs and like find somebody in the band that was kind of cool, or the tour manager or production manager. And I just say, just stay here. Don't, put her in catering. Like, don't talk to anybody, or if you're in trouble, go over here. And
how old is she?
Now she's 20.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You look so young. I can't believe that.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I play this set, and I had left her with, I think, the people from Fleet Foxes, who seem like sweet people.
How old was she at this time?
10 or 12.
Okay.
And I was looking all over for her, and I was freaking out. I was like, oh no, I'm going to get my kid taken away from me. I can't find where my kid is. And then I see her sitting next to Jason Newsted. And Jason Newsted has brought his lunch in a brown paper bag, and is just talking to my daughter about like music. And my daughter has no idea who he is. She just knows that he's cool and that he's super sweet. And he was just like, Jason Newsted was watching my daughter while I was playing the show. He was so cool.
That's awesome.
And obviously she didn't get taken away from you. He's a good babysitter.
Yeah, he was a great babysitter. I highly recommend him.
If
you can afford him.
Yeah, if you can afford him. I talked to Des from Devil Driver, who I've known for years and years, and he laughed when I brought this up, but I told him he was one of the only examples that I could name that was not subject to rockstar revenge. Meaning that when he had kids, he only had sons, because I believe rock stars are doomed to not only to have daughters, but to have beautiful daughters. And so, Chris, when you bring that up, it's like, okay, well, there's another victim of rock star revenge now, because your daughter is beautiful. Are you guys all nodding? Are you all victims of the rock star revenge too?
I definitely have a beautiful daughter. She's young still. She's almost 10, and she's gorgeous, and she does some shows with me too, but she's cool to hang out on stage left. She'll hang out by the work box sometimes. In fact, one time Jock brought up the Palladium. We played there. It's been a few years now, but she was like sitting kind of crisscross applesauce on my cabinets right there on stage left at the Palladium during the show with her big headphones on. But yeah, it's fun to bring them to shows for sure.
I don't have children, so that's why my room looks like a 12-year-old's creation. So
your room, the people can't see this, but in having these conversations with the musicians that I've had to have remotely, because we obviously aren't able to go to shows and see you guys so I can do these interviews in person. It's been really interesting to see the creative spaces that you guys make for yourselves at home, and how you're decorating your workspaces, because you guys do get to collect all these amazing pieces of art or collectibles from your favorite bands that you've toured with, or artwork and gold records. And you guys all have these amazing, creative, inspirational spaces that you're sitting in right now. You guys could be like rock and roll interior decorators on HGTV.
Let's do it. Let's get that show rolling.
Right. We got to do something, right?
Well, you can kind of see how professional each one's like. Chris, like you have, that's all the stuff for
soundproofing.
Yeah, right? Yes, he's like a real professional. Me, I'm just, I was doing all these videos, playing guitar or whatever, doing stuff like this. And I was like, man, it just looks boring. And it's just an off-white background, and I was just, it kind of started with one thing, and it just kind of expanded because it just wanted something to exist there, So it's not.
Your
room
looks amazing. Everyone's room looks amazing. I have room envy right now. Even Carrie, you have that like skeleton going on in the background.
Yeah. So this is my new home studio. I call it MCHQ, and it's one of the things that I was able to do, calling in every favor on the planet. When the radio station went off the air towards the end of February, I went out to Vegas and saw you, Chris, and saw Bush, came home, had some job interviews, and thought, all right, I might end up back on the radio pretty quickly. I've been at WAF since I was 18 years old, so I never had another job.
Crazy.
I didn't even have a resume. I haven't had a resume since 1997. So I started trying to put this plan together of like, all right, well, maybe I could get back on the radio, figure out what I'm going to do. And everybody had always said like, well, you should have your own podcast. You should be kind of doing your own thing. And then I was like, I don't have a place to do that. And then when the lockdown happened, I was like, shit, I better build a studio or something. And then there was a run on all the gear, on microphones and mixers and cables and mic stands, because every broadcaster, television, radio, whatever, is working from home. And every musician now is trying to create an at-home recording studio so they can continue to work and create while they're all locked down. And so I had to call every favor from every roadie I know, every sound guy, to be like, give me a line on one of those mics. Can you hook me up with a mic stand or whatever? So I was lucky to be able to put this room together and launch the podcast and kind of.
So you know, Carrie,
forward.
you know I have a podcast.
I do, the X-Men. Yeah.
So I've been doing mine for like 4 years, and like, you know, Mark's been on my show, and you know, it's funny because now they're like starting a podcast is a. Because, like you said, this run on gear, because everyone's home, it's one thing kind of anyone can do, and everyone can do. So it's like, you know, there's a big boom right here. Let you know, Doc Cole been here, all right?
Yeah, you've been here for a while.
Okay.
I had a podcast at AAF, but.
Your voices are so cool. I'm not going to enter into that podcast game.
Listen, I think your voice is lovely, okay?
Thank you.
You keep creating amazing music, and I will interview you to talk about it.
By the way,
want.
Chris, I also have to bring up, so I actually started doing this other like web show called Last Words through this website, We Are the Pit, and we like basically it's like this week in metal, rock, whatever. And so the new Bush album was actually on there, so I've been like listening to the record. And I just want to say congratulations, it's a really, really great record. And, you know,
thanks, man.
No
I appreciate
problem, man.
that.
Really liked it, really enjoyed it.
That was one of the things I wanted to talk to all of you guys about, because there have been concerns from artists being worried about releasing new music and not being able to tour on it. And you guys all within the last few months have released new music in one way, shape, or form. I mean, the Bad Wolves record came out right before AAF was off the air and all of that. Can you talk about the decision into whether or not you're going to release new music now, and how important it is to be able to tour in support of a new record that you released?
So I've been thinking about this. I'm glad you asked that question, because I've been thinking about this primarily because of, you know, how you mentioned Lamb of God released an album in spite of having to cancel a whole lot of touring. You know, we were going to be out, and, you know, in the context of knowing we were going to release the album, we had a ton of touring planned for this year, and of course all that has been canceled, but we released the album nonetheless. And I was thinking about it, like, you know, the music industry is certainly has its patterns, and it has its conventions of how things are done, and most of those things are long established, and change seems to happen very slowly in terms of the paths people take, you know, in the music industry. And I personally, I'm starting to kind of wrap my head around this idea that I don't think it necessarily matters anymore if there's a tour directly associated with the release. I mean, I'm sure there are people that are involved in marketing and selling records that have all the algorithms and all the metrics and data to you know, find out whether it's worthwhile. But I mean, I just feel like the way people listen to music now, and the way music is sort of moves around, I don't know if it's necessarily you know, I don't know if it's necessary that a tour be right on top of an album. I think people are going to buy the album and listen to the album if they're going to buy it and listen to it. People are going to go to the show and see the live experience if they're going to go to the show and see the live experience. And those things are going to overlap like they're going to overlap. I mean, I that's just kind of a gut feeling I have. It's not based on any real research I've done. I'm sure maybe that there are cases where someone goes to the show and sees the opening act and says, oh yeah, I've never seen them before, I'm going to pick up their album or whatever. And I think that happens, and those sales certainly count. But I just don't know if I feel like it's really, you know, just gutting the release of an album if you can't tour directly on top of it.
I think it changes what how people are used to doing things. I mean, record industry is always in flux, right? But for sure, if you have a song that's on, they all work hand in hand. Like how the industry is now is so fragmented. Like people are like, what does radio mean? What does streaming mean? What does social media mean? And how do they all look at each other? But certainly if you have a tour coming up and you have a record coming out and your song is on the radio, people are like, oh yeah, I like that band, because there's so much information going on that when they hear your song, you know, a lot of times with our band, people will be like, oh, you guys have a record out? You know, they'd be like, you know, and so when you have a song on the radio, they're like, oh, I like this band, you know, and that helps advertise, and that helps with the promoters advertising ticket sales. But I do think it's a good time to be brave. Like, I've been working with a lot of different artists right now, and some people are scared to put out a record. But if you don't put out a record now, you're going to get caught up in an avalanche of all these people that have been holding out their record. You know, like people who waited are like, oh, Metallica just put out a record? Oh, they have a new Chris Cornell song out? Like, you're going to get caught up in the avalanche. So we got to keep doing what we do. Ever since I was 18 and people were trying to sign Orange 9mm as a kid, everybody in the music business was like, yo, it's not the same as it used to be. But it's never the same as it used to be. And we got to keep moving on, and we got to keep playing guitar and making music and doing the stuff that we do. And, you know, this is the new landscape for now. So let's keep doing it, you know?
And I think, Chris, your point is well taken too, because there's a disconnect from my experience for the most part, that from what you guys, the way you guys roll out, because both you guys are on terrestrial radio and you're on, you know, more commercial radio, whereas Lamb of God isn't really at all. We're on, you know, satellite radio, and they're, you know, not to take anything away from the wonderful metal stations that do actually play us, but it's not the same. It's not the same component of the whole global picture for us radio that it is for you guys. So that probably does make a difference in terms of a single that you're out there, you know, getting airtime and that kind of thing.
Yeah, one thing I kind of want to speak to is, you know, like Chris was saying, in terms of flux, I think you have to look at not only the music industry, but all industries as essentially having shorter life cycles in terms of what works. So you go back, you rewind the clock, 15 years ago, we had a destabilizing factor in the music industry where downloading became a big issue, record sales started to fall, and then you had the rise of streaming. But there was a gap, maybe about a 5-year gap, between where the money from streaming didn't really make up for this loss of revenue from album sales. And that was, so, and then at the same time you had social media take over and become the primary way music was promoted. So to me, this is just another destabilizing thing that forces you as an artist and a creator to adapt. All right. And I actually think this is like, I think if you're in the service industry and things like that, or you're doing, you know, concerts, things like that, those industries are taking a massive hit, and it sucks and it's terrible. But for creatives, this is an amazing opportunity to recalibrate actually what your job is. Like Bad Wolf started this Patreon account, and it's like, I go live every week with, like, it's a small group of people, it's like 50, 60 people, but these are like the super fans, right? And I went last night, I was practicing Bad Wolf songs because we're doing some playthroughs today, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go live and like just let these people just be like have an avenue into like what I do, and it's like, and they loved it. They were so, because they're hungry for any connection to the bands, and so to me, like, it was realizing that we used to think our job was recording and playing live music, and there's so much more to what this actual profession is. If you can back up and not get wrapped up in like, oh, we used to do this, we used to do that. It is what you want it to be, and we have the tools to kind of express that now more than ever. And
the boundaries are wide open, Doc. I love your point, because I've been thinking about this too. I love the word opportunity, which is what you said. This climate, this landscape, in terms of the pandemic, in terms of all the touring being shut down, that kind of thing, while it's certainly easy to see it as an obstacle, as a challenge, as a damper on the whole industry, and it is all of those things, but it's also an opportunity for the cream to rise to the top, for the people, the creative types, the people in the artists and the people in our industry that are innovative and that are creative and that are willing to take risks and willing to come up with new models and new new ideas and how we engage fans in how we, like you said, Doc, redefine our role as artists, as musicians. The people that are really going to be kind of pushing those boundaries and that are willing to take risks and stick their neck out and maybe even get snipped at a little bit. But if those are the ones, that are going to sort of, there are a lot of people that are going to capitalize on this environment. And the people that are the most innovative and the most creative and the most willing to kind of engage in that risk taking are the ones that will capitalize on it. And I would like to think of it as, I know some of the things that the people I'm working with and my organization are doing internally, and some of the things we're working on where if we can establish those kind of new versions of what we do and then touring comes back, I'd like to get, to the point where when touring comes back, it's just another added layer that we had sort of not written off, but like compensated for. You know what I mean? And not just financially, I think creatively as well.
Well, part of the reason why I wanted to get all of you guys together, you would think maybe that, Bush, Bad Wolves, Lamb of God, all in one podcast might not make sense to some people, but the reason why I wanted to bring you guys all in, not only because you all play the same instrument, but I view you guys as three individuals that have exactly the outlook that you guys are talking about. I love how you all are always doing multiple things simultaneously, whether it be producing other artists or writing with other artists, using all of the forms of all of this new media that we have access to. And I just view all three of you guys in that same light, is that the band that people know you for the most is not the only thing that you are, because all three of you are constantly pushing to create new kinds of art and be inspired by working with all of these different people. And that was why I wanted to bring you guys all together. And exactly what you're talking about is why you're all three of you looking at a global pandemic and being locked down in the house where your primary income and industry is been rendered impossible. And yet all three of you guys are finding a way to be optimistic, creative, and really push the boundaries to see what all three of you are capable of. It's amazing.
But isn't that what it took for us to get where we've gotten from day one? I mean, I this is my first time ever talking with Chris, but Doc I've known since we were kids. I mean, since Doc, I think was 18 or 19 years old.
I was in high school. I was younger than that. I was 17 years old.
And I was in, I guess, my mid-20s. And, we were, playing for a beer and a bowl of spaghetti, and sleeping on someone's couch. Like,
you were lucky.
If we were lucky. And doing it anyway. And so Doc and I high five a lot because we went from literally playing people's living rooms, and I'm sure Chris has plenty of similar experiences, to playing just like basements and living rooms, to really, we're playing arenas and huge festivals and on the radio and all that great stuff, you know what I mean? So we really haven't skipped a single rung of the ladder, and I wouldn't take any of it away. And I think that sort of, I just think that kind of level of commitment and that persistence and that the feeling, the necessity to rebound and to recalibrate and to take stock of the environment you're in and try and function in it is part of our DNA as musicians that came up through this thing. So I hate the reason that we're talking about a pandemic, and I hate that people are getting sick, and I hate that economies are being challenged and that kind of thing. But just on a personal creative level, like I said, I think it's an opportunity for those that will sit on their hands and wait for things to get back to normal are probably going to get lost in the sauce a little bit.
I knew that you guys were tight, Doc and Mark, and that's why I was here to have those old school conversations with Chris, because out of the three of you, Chris and I came up together because WAAF helped to champion Orange 9mm way back in the day when I first started on the air. So all of those memories that Mark and Doc have about starting off in the early days, Chris, I remember those times just getting in at radio and watching Orange 9mm be one of those bands that AAF took a chance on when nobody else would, because that style of music was so new and uncertain for a lot of established rock stations.
I so appreciate that. I love you for that and other things. And I was gonna say that I don't know you dudes well, but I bet you not one of us got into this to make money. And so my dad always used to be like, you know, don't play music. You know, I come from a working class family. Like, how are you going to make money doing that? And I never thought about it. And thank God I never thought about it, because it would have freaked me out. And we're just doing what we're doing. And I remember those days, like when Orange 9mm was going around the country with Korn and Deftones, right? We were playing places that were like, had sand floors. You know, there would be like 10 people, because we were all doing heavy music at a time where people were like, oh, we don't want this. You know, it wasn't what was popular. And people like you were like, I like this, you know, and eventually if you stay true to your heart and your creativity and you keep driving, I mean, there's no guarantees in life, but that's the only way I know how to do it. And I'm not sitting here now during the pandemic going like, you know, luckily I know I'm in a better position than maybe a lot of people, but I'm still not going, I got to do this to make money, because the moment that I feel like I'm doing stuff to like make money, it feels perverted to me. Like, I don't like, if I wrote a song and I was like, I'm writing this song to make money, I think it would be terrible.
Well, I think it like it poisons the well. It's you know, it's the way I look at it is, if you do something that you believe in and then you elevate the level of craft so that you like it and the people involved think it's really great, then that's where then the money comes after the good intention is laid down. I would say, if you want to make money, then get into like the derivatives market or so, like, you know, if your starting point is money, I mean, maybe if you're a rapper, I guess that's probably
just manage the band. Just don't be in the band. Manage
totally.
Yeah, it's because like I said, we're probably in the 1% of 1% of people that actually do make a living from this, and even this, I always feel like I'm walking on, you know, a paper floor that it could disappear at any second. So I'm always like, that's a big reason why I do so many different things, is that I feel it's inherently unstable and that you can't really count on it. And just because you're at this level now, in a year or 2 years, you could be, you know, I could be back to, you know, flipping burgers or mowing lawns. So I'm always
yeah, it's a fist fight, and there's always somebody that, like, you know, when people don't want something. You know, I was saying this, I was in the studio with a singer the other day, and we were talking about, like, if you don't want it, there's somebody else out there that wants it more than you. You know, and you got to still want it. I don't know.
Do you think, and I don't know all of your backgrounds specifically, but you bring up, you know, coming from a working class blue collar family. I grew up that same way. Do you guys feel like that upbringing, especially getting into the music business, made you able to handle that uncertainty of success or financial stability, that it keeps you hungry, that blue collar kind of scrape your way by kind of thing?
I don't know. I don't think I ever knew anything to compare it to. You know what I mean? It just was my reality. I mean, I grew up in, you know, suburban Southeast Virginia. My dad worked in a beer can factory. I didn't, you know, I had everything I needed and most of the things I wanted. I certainly wasn't poor. But when it came to like music, you know, like I was saying, you know, just with Doc, like we were sleeping in the van. Like it didn't matter. You know, my parents weren't sending me checks to, like, you know, support me while I was out, you know, trying to, and like Chris was saying, I didn't do it for the money anyway. So I think, you know, the fact that it just felt, for me personally, I just always felt like it's just what the hell I did. And I still feel that way. And that's touching on what Doc was saying too. Like, you know, I've had success beyond my wildest dreams in music. But I still just, I literally posted on my Twitter this morning, in my experience, the key to success is be good at what you do, never stop working, and surround yourself with people that are good at what they do and never stop working. And that's kind of anytime I've ever had like success, really at anything, but definitely in music, and I've been fortunate enough to have quite a bit of success in music, it's because those kind of things were in place. And I just think I sort of stumbled into that kind of headspace, that kind of paradigm, and I just never stumbled out of it. In spite of all my best efforts to stumble out of it, I always I managed to somehow kind of stay on track, at least in that sense.
Both my parents were musicians, so they met in the same band. My father's a piano teacher, piano player, lives and breathes music, and then kind of had this greater apparatus of like grandparents who were very influential on me. But I don't, my parents never had money. I grew up in the city. Like I grew up like urban, kind of landscape, and it was just I had I had no plan, in life for anything. It was like, I guess I'm gonna go to college, and I lasted like a semester, but it was like I just kind of was like, I like music, I like the band, I think we're doing something cool, and I just didn't think as far as past as my nose, and one thing led to another, and I feel like I kind of, as they say, Forrest Gumping it through life, just kind of like, do you want to do this? Yeah, sure, I guess I'll do that. And you just kind of, and you just do one thing, and then another thing, and you just kind of ended up where I ended up, but it was no like great plan. I think with me, my work ethic is just, I just like doing things that I like to do. If I'm going to do something, I'd rather be doing something that I like, and I think it's a blessing because we've all been there where you have to work the day job or you can only do the thing you love on the nights and weekends. And so it's like my only goal was like, I just want to do the things I like all the time. And then when you're doing that, like I said, it is work, but it's not, it's just not the same. It's just like, like I said, when like Chris Rock did this, he said the difference between a job and a career is that in a career, it's like they gotta make you go home to stop, work. You know what I'm saying? When you're at a job, you're like ready to clock out, and you leave. And then when you have a career, it's like there's not enough hours in the day because you're so invested in it because it's part of who you are and it's everything. I don't know.
Can we go back to the beginning? You guys are all guitar players. I think growing up, we all share an early love of music, whether we got that from an older sibling. In my case, it was my parents. The change that you guys have, besides the fact that you're three guys, is that you all have musical ability, which I tried and do not have. And so I want to talk about what it was that made you feel like you needed to be a musician and what it was about the guitar in the early days when you first picked it up that you were like, okay, this is what my life was meant to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is a part of me. So can you guys all talk about what made you love music in the first place?
Chris, you want to go?
Chris, you're up.
You haven't spoken in a minute.
My parents took me to the early Suzuki programs in New York when I was a kid. Suzuki.
What's Suzuki?
Suzuki was a Japanese method by a Japanese music teacher who taught children how to play initially the violin and then other instruments by ear. So like sitting a young toddler down on a carpet, listening to like Beethoven or Bach, and then having a violin there. So I had a well-trained ear as a kid. And then I tried to pick up the guitar when I was fairly young, and as we all know, like guitar is unforgiving and brutal and just hurt your hands. So I was like, forget about this. I'm not playing this instrument. I played the drums for a little bit, but when I came back to guitar because there was this band of like high school kids that had just graduated high school, and they used to come into the cafeteria in my high school and play songs for us. And they would this one band, they would play the Allman Brothers, and they would play like slide guitar. And I was like, what is that? I was like, I want to do that. Like the sound of it went through me, and that was like at the time when I was hanging out in parking lots and people were selling like Rollies and, listening to Black Sabbath in the parking lot, and Guns N' Roses had just broken, not before they were a big band. Like they just came out, and I was like, this is cool. I want to be involved in this. So I got my great grandfather's pre-Gibson Epiphone that he had that was under the stairs, like the whole time I was living in my parents' house. And I tried to string it up, and I just taught myself how to play guitar by listening to Led Zeppelin records on my little sister's Fisher-Price record. I've just spent the whole summer indoors with an acoustic guitar, like listening and putting the needle back and listening, and I learned like all the Zeppelin riffs one summer. I spent the whole summer indoors.
Awesome.
Talk about like setting the bar high. Like no big deal.
I'm thinking like that's your start.
Yeah, like I'm just gonna try and replicate
Suzuki and Led Zeppelin.
What about you, Mark?
So I have a big brother. He's about 8 years older than me. So when I was 6 or 7, he was 14 or 15, and I was 6 or 7 in the late 70s. So all of the music that he was listening to, Aerosmith, Lynyrd Skynyrd, AC/DC, Van Halen, Boston, all that stuff was coming out of his bedroom. And it was just, I was just soaking it up. I would just go in there and sit and listen, and it was like 8-track tapes and that whole thing. And no one in my family played an instrument. But there was always music playing. And my mom tells me, is even before I can remember, she's like, I could put the little 45s on the floor and you knew which one was which song. Because I was just so keyed into like what was what and already paying attention. And then I think that I wanted to play drums first, and I got just one of those just real cheesy like drum sets, and it was too loud. My dad put it out in the garage, and that kind of faded away. But then I got a little older. I was like 12, and I asked my parents again, like, want a drum set? And like, no, it's too loud. And I was like, okay. Second choice was guitar, and they got me a little nylon string acoustic, $15 out of the newspaper, and I would just sit there kind of plucking at it. And just right away, like I just became enamored with this idea of what a guitar could do. And I remember seeing like I lived in a real small town, like in Virginia, so you didn't just go somewhere and see an electric guitar. But if we would go to the big mall in Hampton, like in the big city, and see like the store with the electric guitar, to me it was just like this holy, just this glowing, like mystical thing, this electric guitar. I thought it was the coolest thing that could possibly exist. I still kind of do. But I just, all the cliches, I was like, I can't remember. I think my parents bought me my first like electric, and then I didn't even realize that like distortion was part of the amp. I thought distortion was a technique. So I would strum a guitar and I'm like, I can't make it sound like, it sounds like bring, you know what I mean? What am I doing wrong? And I had to like figure out that, oh, you need an amp or a pedal to make it sound distorted. But I just kind of figured all these things out, and just all the cliches, like playing till my fingers bled, did it, fell asleep, with my mom said she would come in my room and I was asleep with the guitar folded over the guitar, just because I wouldn't stop playing. I couldn't get enough, man. And back then it was cassettes, so all my cassettes had like, you would just trying to listen to it and you would hear all the little cuts in the tape from me pausing it, trying to learn the riff, And unlike Chris, it took me a minute to get to Zeppelin. I was learning like AC/DC and the Cult and Sex Pistols and stuff like that. Stuff that was like cool songs, but relatively easy to play.
Like Smoke on the Water.
Yeah, stuff like that. Stuff that's like Black Sabbath too, like, and that the good songs and great riffs, but not technically that difficult, and just kind of worked my way up into Van Halen and Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and then Metallica and Megadeth and that kind of thing.
My situation. So like I said, I grew up in a very musical home, but I think there's just something about adolescence when you kind of, the hormones start happening around that 12, 13 age, and that seems to be the time that young people tend to not only become passionate about music, and specifically their music of their generation, whatever's happening, it just speaks to that kind of adolescent brain, and maybe it's just, you start, things start happening downstairs and you start looking at girls, oh, that looks weird, and all of a sudden that seems to go hand in hand with wanting to pick up an instrument. And really for me it was two moments. I started like really getting into rock music, and it was, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody, that midsection where it, you know, breaks out into that big guitar riff, and the guitar solo. Obviously, that song was incredible. And then November Rain by you know, Guns N' Roses, because it has 3 solo sections, but the actual apex of the song is the guitar and lead guitar, really beautiful melodic lead guitar. And I think there's something also about Slash as just a persona. He kind of embodied everything that could be cool to, you know, a 13-year-old, but also I'm 40 now and I still think he's like the coolest guy in the world. But he just kind of embodied all that. And I think there was just something about those 2 moments that said, I don't know, whatever, that thing gives me goosebumps. That sound, that melodic, beautiful sound, it seemed like a superpower. And I was like, I want to learn how to, I just was just attracted to it. And somehow I stumbled upon some beat up acoustic guitar. I don't even remember where it came from. The thing wasn't in tune. I mean, the action was probably, you know, the strings were probably an inch off the thing, but I just literally picked it up and just started messing around with it with no knowledge of anything. And my dad just saw me screwing around with this thing for I don't even know how long. And he got his girlfriend at the time. I thought you know, I just thought he gave us a guitar, but apparently it was just a loaner guitar. It was his girlfriend's like Ibanez Les Paul kind of copy. And it was like from there, then I started playing that. And then my brother, who was a year older than me at the time, me and him, our main interest was actually drawing. We would draw comic books all day and all night. And he started seeing me play guitar. So it's like that probably older brother like jealousy thing where it's like, well, he's gonna play, I'm gonna play. So then he started playing, and then we kind of developed natural competition of like, oh, you got better than this, I'm gonna try this. And then and then it just kind of one thing led to another, and then for me personally, I found out I had much more natural aptitude for guitar than I did visual art. It came easier, you know, and that's something like kind of natural intuition in life of like following your kind of your north star by just, it feels better. It feels like it's working, and it just kind of went from there.
You guys touched on it a little bit, but will you just push it a little bit further and talk about, because it's such a subjective argument, everybody's top 10 best guitar players or top 10 best frontmen, whatever. But for you as an individual musician, who are your like Mount Rushmore guitar players that you feel like have inspired you, not only to pick up the instrument in the first place, but just throughout your career that you go back and go, okay, you know, I wouldn't be the player I was now if I didn't have that person to listen to or aspire to, or...
Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Billy Gibbons. Those are always the top 3 for me. My daughter's middle name is Paige. Like, that's the guy for me. After them, like, probably Eddie Van Halen. Dime's in there. Dime in terms of, like, a modern, like, more direct practical applications to what I do in Lamb. That's probably a good 5 for me.
Can you not use them after you take them? Because if I go last, you dudes are going to...
No, you can use them.
I'm taking those. That's my team.
I got Jimmy Page. Go Fish.
Go ahead,
Doc. Yeah, I mean, Slash is still kind of the top of the list for me. Still my favorite guitar player. Melodically, I get so much... I'm always trying to conjure that kind of simplicity and feel and kind of crafting melodies and telling stories kind of with lead guitar. And then, you know, thrash metal, rhythm guitar playing, you know, so it's like really James Hetfield on one hand and Dave Mustaine kind of, I take influence a lot of them both, but also Marty Friedman from Megadeth, that kind of odd neoclassical kind of Arabian flair is just something I've always been captivated by. Randy Rhoads is big for me. Dimebag, of course, and then later on, I really was influenced by a lot of the guitar players coming out of Sweden, like Gothenburg, scene, be it or Bill Steer from Carcass and Mike Amott from Arch Enemy, and that stuff was very, very impactful on me.
We're talking about the beginning, right? Not like who influences us
Well,
now.
no, but I mean, it could be anything. It's just like your guitar players that like you wouldn't be the guitar player you are if all of them weren't there to either inspire you in the beginning or keep pushing you now.
Well, Dwayne Allman and Jimmy Page are like everything to me. I have a coffee table book of Jimmy Page photography, and every day I just open it up and look at it. I don't think there's anybody that was cooler than that dude in rock and roll, and also nobody really plays like Jimmy Page because there's so much slop is so much part of the sound. I remember one time Eddie Van Halen famously like criticized the way Jimmy Page played. And I was just like, a lot of people, and Eddie Van Halen's a god. I'm definitely not going to get on a radio station or a podcast and start criticizing Eddie Van Halen. Yeah. He's the worst. No, he's a god. He's an icon. But the thing is that I know a ton of people who can play and sound exactly like Eddie, and I don't know anybody that does Jimmy right, because Jimmy was like this kind of weird, he's really a wizard. Everything, his presence, everything.
He's fearless too.
Yeah.
His phrasing is so specific too. The way he his stops and starts and his landing spots and all that is so unique.
And he never played. Have you guys ever heard the isolated like Zepp tracks of his rhythm playing?
No.
No.
Like where he's like tuning in between, and he never played. Everyone thinks they know how to play these Zeppelin songs, including me. And when I listened to him, I was like, he's playing it different every single time.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like on a record, if you were making a record with the producer, they'd be like, you played that chorus differently.
Yeah.
He did every chorus differently. Like he just
That's
was.
Awesome.
He was out there doing his thing. I love Eddie Lang, who is an American guitar player, kind of older jazz guitar player, and people like George Barnes. I love Robert Fripp. When I was a kid, I really loved Brian Baker from Dag Nasty. He really influenced me. A lot of punk rock dudes influenced me because I would go to shows, and that gave me the inspiration to get on stage because I was like, I can do what that dude's doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I can do those things. And it inspired me, whereas someone like Randy Rhoads when I was a kid, like that was fearsome. Like Randy was like just like classical shredder. So when
seemed unattainable in a way.
Yeah. So it's like the more punk rock guys, and even like Prong. Like I thought first time I heard Prong, I was like, I can do that. And Helmet, which is a band that I ended up being in, but when I heard the first Helmet 12-inch, I was like, oh, I could do this, that I can relate to this, so it was a dream come true for me to actually get into that band and be playing with them. But people like that, like Page Hamilton, was a huge influence on me because he ends up actually being a classically trained jazz guitarist, but in Helmet, it's just like all anger, it's angular and anger. So,
by the way, I want to say one people I missed. Jerry Cantrell is big for me. Just everything about it he does, so understated, so tasteful. And then currently Gary Clark Jr. is my favorite modern guitar player. Like the guy's just
monster.
Great player.
Leads like I haven't been moved by a guitar player like emotionally, maybe ever. Personally.
Yeah, there's some modern guys too that like probably don't like shape necessarily like the foundation of my playing and my love for guitar. But have popped up and become real go-tos for me, like Mark Ford, who was in the Black Crowes for a long time, Luther Dickinson, who was also in the Black Crowes for a long time, Warren Haynes is a great player, you know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of, there's Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course, yeah.
For somebody that doesn't play guitar, like myself or anyone that's listening that doesn't play guitar, Mark, when you talk about things like phrasing, or when you guys were like really talking about Jimmy Page and kind of analyzing the slop that you were talking about, Chris, can you guys kind of explain that in a way that someone that doesn't play guitar can kind of understand why it's different and what you mean by phrasing? Or because you guys are using a lot of hand gestures like you're playing a guitar right now. but I think it's really interesting to have you guys explain it to someone like me that doesn't really understand as a non-player what that means.
I think for me, like to explain it to a non-player, because me and Chris and Doc can talk about phrasing and note choice and what sort of modes they like, or what where they play on the neck and But I think as a listener, somebody having their own unique particular voice on the instrument, and that doesn't always equate to being the most technical player or being the most knowledgeable player. I have certainly never been the fastest or most schooled anything on the instrument or on anything else, but I've always aspired to like be recognizable, where if someone heard a piece of music or a solo I did or something like, or a riff, even more, I guess in my case, or a solo, they'd be able to identify it, hopefully, as my playing. That's something I aspire to. And I think so some of my, you know Jimi Hendrix when you hear him. You know Jimmy Page when you hear him. You know Billy Gibbons. The places he stops, his style of his vibrato, all those kind of things are so signature and so personal to their. At the end of the day, it's your hands doing it. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like despite all of this processing we may have, or this new beautiful guitar, this amp we're playing through, it's still like our idea flowing through our fingers onto the instrument, and that kind of voice and having that sort of personality in your playing, I think, is what separates like the greats from just someone that can play guitar very well.
I was talking to somebody about this last night, and I think it's like baking or cooking or gardening, but maybe more people can relate to cooking. Whereas like cooking is a science. There's like a system of measurements that you can put in, but if you don't cook with love, man, it can really suck. And so like there's an element of magic to music. It's a science, but if you forget about the magic and who you are and what we're doing, really, like all of us are talking about how like it didn't make sense. We were just drawn to music. We wanted to do this. We felt this vibe. Like that is really what's important. So these people have like Pete Townsend, you can hear one, and he's not generally regarded as, in the realm of like Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads. For me, he is. I love that dude is so powerful. You can hear one note that dude plays and shut it off and know that it's him playing it. Mm-hmm. And that's that magic. So even though there's a whole science and kind of a system behind it, it's the magic, it's the human element. And I think that's really important, especially today. I know we all kind of grew up through actually bands playing in the room and recording together, and maybe analog systems where now things are just like chopped up, and it gets harder and harder to kind of like get your voice through that when things keep getting manipulated. But the magic and the feeling and the connection is why we got into this, and that's what makes, regardless of what anybody thinks about Jimmy Page or the Slop, like you feel that there's something mystical about that band, magical about that band. Billy Gibbons, like there's something like, even when you see him playing now, right? He just like, that dude has like this soul to him. Doesn't matter. You see him in his house sitting on top, with a bowl of guacamole that he has a famous recipe for. And just sitting there playing the guitar, like he could be playing nothing, but that dude is magic, and that spirit comes through his instrument.
And nobody does it like that.
Nobody
does it like that. There's not somebody, like we were saying earlier, like there's someone else behind you waiting to do it. There's nobody else behind him waiting to do that. I mean, there's some people that might want to, but it ain't gonna be like that,
Yeah.
Just kind of, I mean, I think these guys distilled it pretty well. I don't know how much more I can elaborate, but I think it's just a reflection of personality. I mean, ultimately, especially I think, specifically with lead guitar, the best kind of representation of that is kind of a vocal quality, right? We're kind of trying to make it imitate a human voice and emote kind of through that instrument. So it is about your personal voice, and it's something it's actually taken me a long time to kind of accept or come to grips with, is like that actually, like being okay with not being perfect or like that the inconsistencies or the like, that is me, like that, like, oh yeah, my vibrato is not exactly perfect, but you can't, like vibrato, for example, you can't really do someone else's vibrato as much as you could sit there and practice and try and emulate some. It's literally like, that's your hands, that's your expression. And like, even if it's not perfect, it's like, but that is kind of me. Even if I'm not totally happy with it, it's, you know, and so that's been kind of like, all right, I can't be, and unfortunately, I think the one of the real downsides of the metal community, at least, is they really view playing as like sports and competitive, and I think it really undermines this idea of like, there's not like better and worse in this. It's just like, yeah, you might be able to play that particular thing better than me, or faster, or cleaner, or with better, more effective technique, but you can never be a better me. You know, and just embracing my own like warts and all.
Because that's a trap. Because there's always somebody, you know, on this measure of technical ability. I guess I'm lucky because I was always like playing on tours and stuff with guitar players that were technically way better than me. So I kind of fell out of that competition real quick, and I was like, I'm just gonna write riffs and like play blues over metal riffs, and like kind of got free to that. But I think there's a trap of that, of like that competition thing can get you stuck in like you're saying, Doc, in like the wrong.
And you got to be yourself. And
I
wanted to say to you dudes that just to be like prepared. I'm a fan of both your bands. I've been on Doc. We've done shows together this year.
Thank you. Yeah, we literally just played together like
yeah, October. It wasn't that long ago.
We did that show in Oklahoma City. It was great. Oh no, it was Dallas.
I know it was. I was in the dressing room.
Yeah. Well, I saw you. I literally made like I was happy that we got to stay because we had to leave, but I was like, I want to see Bush. God damn it! I had never seen the band before.
I was listening to both your dudes' latest records, the bands, and I was thinking at both times when solos occurred, I was like, oh, like this lets me know these dudes more. Like, so Doc, what you're saying is exactly what I thought when I heard you were playing, and Mark, same thing. Like, I'm like, when you, I can't remember what song it was. It was like the third or fourth song on the latest record, and I was like, oh, this lets me know this dude.
By the way, but me and the other guitar player both so depending on what solo might be hit.
It's the one you did.
Okay.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah.
Well, it's too, you know, the last thing I was thinking about was like, you know, you could take any one of the three of us and like you can take my guitar and my amp, and it's set up and it's my rig and it's all my stuff, and I'll play it, and I can hand it to either or both of these guys, and they're going to play through the exact same signal path and everything, and it's not going to sound exactly the same. You know what I mean? There is inevitably a human component to this that is that magic, and some of those guys just have that specific thing, and women as well, that have that specific thing that is just untouchable, unattainable.
By the way, and I have a specific story related to this. So I filled in for Mark on a tour opening for Metallica, and the first day I met Kirk Hammett was at catering, and he was like, you know, somehow we got to talk, and he's like, man, it's like, I heard the sound check. It's like, I knew that wasn't Mark's vibrato, and I'm literally playing through his rig. You know, it was my guitar, but I was playing through Mark's rig, but it's like, I can't sound like Mark. Mark sounds like Mark. I can only do me trying to best represent their songs, you know. But a guitar player can hear that from like, you know, muffled halfway walking through the hallway in an arena. Is like, something sounds different.
Well, you guys, there's a difference between music and a lot of other art forms, right? So you bring up sports, you bring up some other things. You can grow up and be a painter, but you're never going to stand in a room at an easel next to Monet. You could grow up loving basketball, but I'll give you this analogy, Doc, that you're never going to play with the big three in Boston in the mid-'80s, right?
Well,
you can.
Technology permitting, you know, it's virtual reality in like 10 years, we'll see.
Virtual reality aside, but in music, you have the ability to go on stage and play with, you just said Kirk Hammett or Slash or so many of the guitar players you guys have talked about. You have that ability in one way or another, sharing a stage at a festival or bumping into each other, mutual friends, whatever, to actually collaborate with your Larry Bird or your whatever. Do you guys have a specific story about something like that where you were just like, I don't fucking belong here right now. I can't believe this is happening?
Doc does.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So I play in this band called the Wedding Band, and it's with Kirk and Rob from Metallica, and Whitfield Crane, Ugly Kid Joe sings, and then John Theodore, who's in Queens of the Stone Age. But you know, I feel like I get that kind of perception from the outside looking in, and people are like, dude, you must be like freaking out. I'm like, no, I don't think you can be in that position if you think that way. You have to kind of feel like you belong, or else you can't show up and actually perform competently, because then you would be in your head and you would kind of let the nerves get the best of you. It's just, in many ways, it's like you've been doing it. It's funny, like when I filled in for Mark, it was the most nervous I'd ever been. I'd never done arena shows like that, playing in the round. It was, and their songs are extremely technical, and you know, but as soon as I walked out there, it was like, oh yeah, this is like what I do. This is my profession. So it's like you get a lot of that, you know, I don't belong or imposter syndrome really is in your head. And when it's all working, whether it is music or sports, you're not thinking. You're just doing. You're being, and it becomes, you know, it's not, you know, getting in your head. If you're on stage and you're thinking, or you're thinking too much, you've kind of lost the plot a little bit, I think.
And Chris, you played with a lot of your idols and bands you were a fan of coming up too as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I already talked about the Helmet one. If I can do a non-metal band for a second, I don't want to. Sure. I don't want to get made fun of.
No, please, please do.
Hey, I don't play at all, so I'm not going to make fun of you.
When after 9/11 happened, they had all these crazy like laws about people coming into the country. So when Blur were trying to come in to promote their record, Alex, the bass player, for some reason couldn't get in, and they needed a person to play bass for these promo shows that they were doing, and they wanted I think that dude's name is Justin that played for Beck, but he couldn't do it either. And my friend called me up and he said, Blur looking for a bass player, and, you know, they're playing a show tomorrow in Texas. And you know, I was like, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could learn 20 songs in like 18 hours and fly there. And the bass player, Alex, called me up. He's like, just put your finger out and, you know, run it up and down the neck. It's just bass. So I was like, okay, cool. And I went in there, and I think they were a little bit disappointed that it was me and not somebody else. So they kind of had, maybe this is my perception because they were really nice people, with their back turned to me. And they just like started counting off the set list, and nobody was making eye contact with me. And then I was playing, but as soon as I started playing, I think we were playing Boys and Girls, you know, that song that they had. I was like, I know this music, you know, like, and I can play it, and I belong here. And then everybody started turning around and staring. And that was like a lot of fun. And my friends who grew up with me that knew I was a big fan of that band and that particular record were coming to see me, and they were like, oh my God. They were like saying, oh my God at me, like in the front row, like, you know, couldn't believe that I was doing it.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
I have asked this question many times of people that are in bands. I'm assuming I know the answer with you guys as well. Do you think it's harder to keep a band together or a marriage together?
I would say a band. Because at least a marriage. I mean, listen, I've never been married. Mark, you know, has been down that path. I just think.
Yeah, my band lasted longer.
Yeah, well, no. Here's well, yeah. I mean, but then again, your band was successful.
Well, you know, I
not to say the marriage wasn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't consider either necessarily. You know, I don't know. I don't want to get into this, but no, you know, we'll put it this way. My band has been around now for 20, 25 years. So,
well, I was thinking about this idea because I think we're in a period of time where even the concept of a band is kind of being there's some questions about if it's antiquated, right? Like it's so much now. If you look at the top of a top 40 chart or something like that, it's really things have filtered towards solo artists. Even back in the day with hip hop, it was like groups, right? It was Tribe Called Quest, Wu-Tang Clan, NWA. Now it's just like one person, right? And so things have kind of filtered that way, and bands, it's like this mini kind of political ecosystem, right? Are you a socialist band where you split everything? Are you a capitalist band where the person who writes the most and the person who is the most popular gets more of the piece of the pie? And those environments, it's like once something becomes successful and it extends past a certain amount of time, it kind of tests like it has to weather so much more with multiple people over long periods of time. I think it's tough, but I guess it's funny. I wonder if you could actually do some research. You could probably find out like what lasts longer and what is more successful, like bands or marriages.
I think it's the same technique for me, not technique, but the same attitude by default for me, because I'm not like purposefully doing something. Is like I keep learning about new things, and I'm kind of irreverent about it. So like if you give each other space when you can, and you keep evolving and become interesting, you don't treat each other with contempt, and you know, and you play a little bit hard to get with your band members and your partner. I think it's a key to like lasting longer. I think people.
That's good stuff, Chris. Damn.
You know, it's just like it's like if you're in a band with somebody, and like, you know, I'm sure as guitar players, you know, we're like working real hard and trying to learn new things, and then we've all been in bands with different people. I'm not going to name anybody, but that are like, you know, like I got it, and they just pick up their instrument when they're on tour and stuff like that. Like that's a drag. So it'd be the same thing in your relationship if you're like, you know, telling the same jokes you told 20 years ago.
I like that.
You got to make them fall in love with you over and over again.
Hey man, you come over and jam. I was
play hard to get with your bandmates, fellas. I'm busy, you know. I got this really interesting opportunity to jam with somebody else.
Yeah. Just let your singer's text sit for 4 or 5 hours before you hit them.
Well, I bring it up because there's so much access now, right, with social media and everything, and there's all of these outside pressures, and if one person in your band says one thing, or if someone in your band's going through a personal crisis, that all of a sudden starts to affect what it is that you guys have as an entity, and trying to manage that and continue to drive forward, I would imagine, is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I mean, speaking, you know, for my band, like we've been together for so long, and we've seen each other go through different phases of our life and different challenges and different trauma and different success and different, you know, high points and low points. And you've got 5 guys kind of going through all those things simultaneously, but together, you know, and on their own, but also in the same, you know, group. So we find, we find ourselves now at this place of sort of like relief. It's almost like we've been through all that crazy stuff and we're still here. And I think it's kind of that cliche of like, what didn't kill us made us stronger. And, you know, we're all have gone through all the drama and trauma and rehabs and divorces and all that kind of stuff, and come out the other end where it's just like, okay, now can we just have fun again? Like, now that everyone has survived and you know, we're all here, let's just have fun again. And that's a cool place to get to. I mean, that's our story. I don't know if it's every band's story, but it took us a lot to get where we are. And I think we're all at a place now where we're just like genuinely grateful to still be around, to still feel like we have creative relevance, to still feel like we have energy creatively, and to be getting along better than probably we've ever gotten along, but certainly since then we have in, you know, a long time. So it's been you know, it's always changing, but it feels good to be in a good place after all of that.
It's funny. I mean, I guess my career track is probably a little more similar to Chris in that, you know, I've worn a lot of hats, and kind of I had my original band and then subsequently went on to being like hired gun guy, or kind of I'm do this project over here and do that. And even with Bad Wolves taking off, I'm still doing other things. I'm still, you know, I toured with Mark right in the middle of kind of Bad Wolves, you know, really doing things. So it's, you know, and the thing is like I can identify where Mark's coming from, because I remember being in one band and was like, we started the band when we were young, and the family aspect and that connective tissue was more important than necessarily the business. And then now I've transitioned to this other period of my career where it's like, it really is with Bad Wolves, it's like a corporation, and I'm just like a cog in that machinery. and where things are not necessarily sentimental in those ways. So it's a bit more cutthroat and kind of it doesn't function in the ways I traditionally think about egalitarian frameworks of bands. So it's kind of incumbent upon me, like I said, that kind of idea of adaptability before, to just understand, okay, this environment is different than that, and it is what it is, and you kind of have to just roll with the punches. And I have like another band I have called Vegas Nerve, which is like my little like kind of prog rock side project, and that is a little more old school, but I can kind of do different things. And I always feel like any situation, I don't care if I'm just jamming with Mark's band for a few weeks or I'm doing a cover thing or whatever, but it's like, to me, a band is always gonna be about, I don't know, that like other thing. Like, I want to hang out with my bandmates. I want to get to know people. I want to connect. I want to, like, that's like, it can't just be about just playing some things. It's got to be this other kind of humanistic level that I'm always trying to hone into, because that's the most important thing. Like, I look at, like, Paul McCartney said something not that long ago about just like, you can do whatever, you can have whatever, but it's like, you're never going to take away my fucking band. Like, he doesn't have to be on stage. He doesn't have to, and he's had the same band because that thing, that camaraderie kind of clubhouse thing is still like the coolest thing. It's the reason today why still kids get together in a room with their friends and make noise together, because it's just something special about it.
What's the original question now? The question is why we...
The difference between or harder with all of the pressures of the outside of maintaining this band when you've got, other people's marriages and struggles and business stuff. And at the end, you've got this core band and keeping that together.
For me, I think it's actual chemistry. Sometimes Gavin and I don't actually fight all that often, but if we do, like on a tour bus or something, the moment we walk out on stage, we start like hysterically laughing at each other. And same thing with like Corey and Nick, who's been playing with us. I think chemistry is super important. And because a lot of touring can be a drag. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but there's, a lot of it can be, when you've been doing it, and I don't look down upon it, it's a blessing to still be able to do it. But when you've been playing some of the same places for like 25 years, you're not like out like getting wasted or, trying to meet people, and you have a family, the show is what it's all about. And so when you go out on stage, you have to have this chemistry with these people. And I don't think you can take responsibility for that. I know we've all been in different bands or had different people play in our bands. Even if they're great musicians, you're like, this isn't right. It doesn't feel good. Like, even if they're a great player. And so chemistry is super important. And that's the one thing I'm super thankful about Gavin and I, is no matter what happens, over the years we've been playing together for like 20 years, it just feels good. And when we go out there, we're like, yeah, the moment I'm still nervous to this day. Like, before I step out on the stage, like one of those big like amphitheater shows, I'm like, am I gonna, do I know the notes? I still do it with like Machine Head. I'm like, where's the first note? I still do it. My brain goes like really crazy. And then as soon as we play, I'm like, oh yeah, like what Doc was saying. I was like, I do this. Like, I know how to do this. I know this. And then you feel the people. And I think that's one of the biggest blessings about music is, I feel like in a moment for that hour and a half, like I feel like it's like one moment when it's great and you're connected with people and like time stands still. And so if you don't have chemistry with people, if someone's knocking you out of that moment, then it ain't gonna last. And the stuff that happens outside, we kind of don't like talk about. Like when Gavin and I talk on the phone, we just talk about like friendship stuff, and we don't talk about band stuff really, because that'd be a drag if I had to call him up every time I didn't like a mix or something like that, So I just think it's like, chemistry, and you can't choose that. It's odd, right? It's like you don't choose who you fall in love with, and almost like you don't find the right person to be in a band with, or the right person to be in love with, or a partner with, until you kind of like acquiesce and let go. And that's when that comes to you, because it's not your choice. That chemistry is like something mystical.
I think, Carrie, you were talking earlier about how, explain this for non-musicians and think, and listening to Chris talk, I think maybe that's something that people that don't play music understand. Or, something they don't understand is that you can't just take, like Chris is exactly what he's saying, you can't just take a bunch of, this guy's good on drums, this is a great bass player, a couple good guitar players, this guy can sing, and throw them in a room, and then boom, you got a great band. Like, it just doesn't work like that. Sometimes it's almost always it's just about it's when it's bigger than the sum of the parts. It just becomes this sort of synergy, and that's that magic, and that's what we're all kind of trying to hold on to.
Well, music is emotional, right? It's emotional for you to put your emotions into it. And then it's emotional for the listener to be able to connect with that and to interpret your emotional product in your songs and make it fit into the life that we're living, and that connection. And you guys all have experience with this as well, as we all do. And, we've just gone through some somber anniversaries and birthdays of musicians that we have lost. And, obviously, Mark, one of the reasons you and I became friends was you were touring on your solo record and on a single that featured Chester Bennington. Can you talk about the emotional connection and the legacy and inspiration that gets left behind? Because there is, for all of that art and emotion, there's a vulnerability that is required on your part to be able to open up and create that music for the listener to be able to attach itself to. And so opening yourself up to being that emotionally raw for everyone's consumption can be difficult, whether it be depression and mental struggles, sobriety issues. And you really are in a very unique place where, for the rest of us non-musicians, the consumers, you are gutting yourselves for us. And that can be really hard for some people to maintain and to handle.
Yeah, it's a weird thing for me. I play guitar, I write a lot of music, I write a lot of lyrics too. And first of all, thanks. I'm glad we got to be friends through that process, Carrie, and such support in that project, and that was such a special kind of moment. And to be able to work, it was an interesting thing to work with Chester on that song, because we co-wrote the lyrics. And I didn't know Chester before, obviously I knew his spectacular voice and his body of work, but I didn't know him on a personal level until we started talking about doing this song. I had sent him the song with the chorus, he loved it, and then we decided to co-write it. We got together and started writing it, right? So we instantly started talking about where we were coming from lyrically, and it took that kind of openness that you're referring to with someone who I respected musically and creatively, but I didn't really know that well personally, for us to be able to like really kind of lock in, and me to share with him that I was struggling to get sober at the time, and for him to share with me some of his kind of internal struggles and what he related to about what I was explaining to him, and some of the experience he had. I don't want to air out his stuff, I'm happy to air out mine, but for us to kind of go back and forth like that on a really like connected, trusting level lyrically, is we put that energy into that song. And I think that's one of the things that like makes it really powerful, is because the input and the energy that was put into that was so genuine and so heartfelt. And I mean, it's testimony to the person that Chester was, for him to be able to be that open and vulnerable with someone who he had only just recently met. And I think, for my part as an artist, as a creative person, it's, it is difficult to kind of open that stuff up and gut yourself, and sometimes that is the case. I mean, I've written songs about the death of my first daughter. I've chronicled my struggles with alcoholism and drug addiction in my songs. I've talked about the, repairing the relationship with my father. All of these things, really, really personal things in my life, right? But it's also very therapeutic for me to do that. It's a way for me to kind of process this trauma and this, confusion about these things in my life that I have. It gives me somewhere to kind of direct that energy. So I'm really grateful to be able to channel it there. And then to turn that out into the world and have people connect to it and make it relatable to their own story, and to have people hear that song and feel like that song's about them and what they're going through. Just to be that small part of it that I get to be is an honor, because what it does is it goes out there and expands. And there's people, even you, Carrie, you're a part of getting it out there. And me and Doc and Chris get to be a part of making this music that goes out and becomes a part of people's lives. And it becomes something that they turn to for strength. And they turn to that they don't feel alone, and that they can identify with something that someone else is going through. So to be a part of that system is one of the greatest joys and honors of my life. And I just am so grateful to have the opportunity to do that, and to also have a place to channel all that stuff that I'm living in and living with. And Chester, man, he had an unbelievable voice and an unbelievable ability to be vulnerable on a lyric and in a track, and it's such a willingness to do that. I think he understood the power of that. I'm just really, really lucky to been able to do that with him.
How do you guys feel about putting your own emotion into your music and being that vulnerable, or people that you've collaborated with maybe that aren't here anymore that allowed themselves to be that way?
I mean, I could say it's interesting. I'm listening to Mark, and I have a good idea of even where you're coming from, Carrie, in terms of that kind of exposure. Sometimes I think about people like Chester or Chris Cornell. And I think Chris Cornell was talking about this idea that he would write certain songs, right, that were talking about some traumatic things that he dealt with, and that basically every time he would do a show, he would basically have to relive this very difficult moment, and that takes this toll, on certain artists all the time. And then hearing you talk about it made me think that I feel like my approach with music is so different. I'm not this kind of wounded soul who uses music to exercise particular demons. For me, it's all good. I creating things makes me feel good, and so I don't have this kind of I'm using music to get over this trauma, or that I'm channeling that. It's weird. It's a bit more, I don't know. It's funny. I shot a movie last week, and I did this scene where I had to be really I was grieving and I was sad, and I was I had this actress next to me who was just she could cry on command, because she's just this really emotional, open person, and that's what makes her a good actress. And I was oh, that's probably the same characteristic that makes someone a great singer and songwriter, who is operating on this emotional frequency that's so vulnerable and so palpable that people connect to it, but it's also this fucking weird burden to just exist around that this thing that we perceive as talent is actually this person who's this emotional lightning rod that people glom onto, that, oh yeah, that's your entertainment, but that's their existence. They're just walking around being this. So it's that person who's brilliant in this film because they're so raw and open is they just exist. They're they're just absorbing all this fucking emotion of life that's heavy. And that's why I think a lot of times you see this happens with the Heath Ledgers of the world, or the the River Phoenixes, or Scott Weilands, or people like this that struggle with addiction or these other things that, and somehow is connected to their art because they're, I don't know, and I'm really not a person like that, so I can it's weird kind of feeling that, but I feel like I'm understanding it from a distance, because I'm not structured that way, which makes me a more functional human being, but maybe not as profound, maybe not as profound an artist.
Doc, I don't think that makes you. I think there's all different kinds of artists. So, relating to what Mark it was saying about Chester. Yeah, I did some work on Grey Days record, and the first day I went in there and I heard Chester's vocals, and these were vocals of Chester from when he was a kid, and the things that he was saying. And I was sitting there with Jay Baumgartner, who I've worked with on a bunch of records, and he ended up mixing that record. But we were like, a lot of people come into studios and they say a lot of stuff because they think that's, what you're supposed to say or what you're supposed to sing when you're in a band. But he was not faking it. He was authentic. And when you could hear his vocal by itself, it gave me chills, that this dude meant that stuff. He was telling us these things, and we were listening to it as entertainment, but it was not just entertainment. It was something very real, and he was telling us the whole time.
He told us for a long time.
Yeah.
I said that about Chris. We had this conversation on the air, Mike Shue and I, because when people were quote unquote surprised by losing Chris Cornell or losing Chester, we had this conversation where I was like, how can any of us be surprised? They were open and honest and emotionally raw for us, and it's all right there. And we consumed it as a product. Like this, we bought the music, we bought the tickets, we bought the T-shirts, we wore it, we listened to it all the time. That music is attached to all of our wonderful memories with our friends growing up, may have inspired other musicians. But at the end of the day, we can't say we were surprised because it was all left right there for all of us to have just interpreted it maybe a little bit differently or whatever. And so that's that. When I talk about this podcast being a rock lifestyle podcast, is it doesn't matter the person. It doesn't matter your background and where you come from and what you do for work. It's that feeling of togetherness and of understanding that we all pull from the music that we love. And it really makes us a bigger, more understanding community, I feel like, in a way, because that fiber is woven through all of us, even if it doesn't look the same or it didn't inspire all of us the same. But as someone that isn't a producer of the art, that is only on the consumer side, I am so grateful for all of you and your bandmates and the music that you've created, because you are, even if you're not emotionally channeling something, Doc, like what you were saying, but you are putting yourself into this music, and it's, for the rest of us that are just listening to it, it's life-changing for us. And I know for you guys as fans of other music, it changes your life as well.
Yeah, like I said, I don't want to. I hope I didn't mischaracterize myself to say that it's not.
No, I understood you completely. I get it.
It is a type of, it is emotionally based, but there is something, I don't know, it's just like I don't know about you guys, can you write when you're sad or depressed? Because I really can't.
See, that's when I write.
Yeah.
And there have been times in my life when I've intentionally structured things so that I will be in that zone so that I can write.
Yeah. Me, I can only. That's it. Only I've definitely written things when I've been down here and there, but it's for me, it's all positive inertia. And
I will say that it's changed a bit in sobriety too. Yeah. It's changed once I got into recovery and that kind of thing, and I sort of recalibrated things a little bit. I didn't have to be so in love and romanticized by tragedy to be able to get into a creative space now. I have a little more of an ability to just kind of let things kind of flow through without just being drowning in whatever emotion I'm tapping into. I tend to be a bit dramatic anyway, but it has changed for me a little bit in sobriety. But I have noticed that I do tend to be inspired by heavy stuff, heavy emotion. I think, sadness and real kind of reflection. I'm not trying to sound so dramatic, but for me, that's really kind of gets my creative juices going.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying lately writing songs for other people, because it takes my ego out of it, and I'm just like, is this sound good? Is this cool? Like, would I hear this and think this was cool? And there's something nice about, I think, Doc, one of the things I relate to with you is being a hired gun for so many bands. Like, you know, like when I came into Bush, like I went from Helmet to Bush, and I like kind of couldn't figure it out at first, because I was like, you know, it's like, I know how to play the parts, but what is like the thing behind this? And so we've had to be in a position where we put ourselves in the emotional places of other people. You know, like, where does this music come from? Like, I can play it, but what does it mean to play it, and what's the idea behind it? And you kind of grow into it and kind of take ownership of as you go on each situation. And so I've really enjoyed, though, making music for people where it's just like nobody knows that I'm doing it, because it's like, I love making music. And I do love making music when I got something like I'm feeling really dark or something about, but also I just like doing it. Like, it's like some kind of puzzle, you know? And I know it's right when, like, I'm standing up in my studio, like moving my body like it, you know, like an idiot by myself. I'm like sitting in here handbagging to something I did by myself, and then run out into the yard and I grab my girlfriend. I'm like, is this cool? You know, like, the process is such a blessing to be able to be involved in that kind of process and do it. And we're all so lucky to just be able to sit here and talk about having been involved in music for this long and be responsible for bringing it to people in one way or the other. And there's all different ways of doing it and consuming it, and like being a fan about it. You know, sometimes I'm sure we meet people on tour that are just like casual about music. You know, they come to the show and they're like, you know, people aren't as into music as we are, you know? So it's just like, people have different people.
My boyfriend's like that. He likes music, but he doesn't live it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I don't understand him, and I look at him like with a cocked head, because I'm like, I don't understand how you think. Like, how do you not live this thing? Like, I date times in my life based on the record I was listening to, or the times I had in my life, what show I was at, or the song that got me through the happiest of times and the saddest of times. And sometimes, you know, like, people that don't live their life through the music that they like, I'm like, I don't get you.
Because Carrie, you're in it. Yeah. That's the thing, like, where I really relate to you is like, you didn't, I'm sure in ways you chose it, but it chose you, and you're impassioned by it. And we were talking together in Vegas backstage, and you're like, you know, when the radio station had changed, and, you know, you were just talking to me about that, I was just like, you're going to be fine. You're going to be doing this. And, you know, like, we're not choosing to do this at this point. Like, this is our life. We're in it. We're lifers, like, and we love it. And we're lucky, you know, and we still got to like fist fight for our supper and stuff like that, but we'll do it. And we love being here.
Yeah. And kind of to pivot off that, that's why we're kind of where we're at. Like, I remember a couple of experiences. Like, I went to see Metallica at this thing called Orion Fests, and they did it in Atlantic City, and they did the Black Album from beginning to end. And then I luckily, like, they hooked me up with these cool passes called the what was it, the pit, like the snake pit, and it's only like 500 people is one thing, and I'm singing every word to every song so loud, but I'm realizing it's this like special snake, so it's probably the most expensive tickets. And I'm looking around, no one's singing along like me. It's the Black Album. It's the biggest metal album of all time. And I would think everyone would be singing all the words to, you know, My Friend of Misery or something. And I'm like, no, it's just me. Then, a very recent experience, Guns N' Roses did a last-second show they played at the Palladium. And it was literally like, I scalped a ticket outside for $300 because I didn't give a fuck, right? That's how amped up I was.
That's probably cheap for Guns N' Roses at the Palladium.
I mean, it was the face value of the ticket, I think, was $180. So it wasn't that. I didn't care. I was just happy. I was like, I went. They ended up playing really late. So by the time they played, people had already left. People would spend hundreds of dollars on tickets had already left because they didn't play till after midnight. I had a friend who like.
What's really late?
It's Guns N' Roses. Do you think they're going to go on time?
Doors were at like 9. They didn't play till midnight.
No opener?
No opener. And by the dude, and I'm just having the time of my. I'm singing the lyrics like deep cuts, like Coma and stuff, right? And I'm looking around, and I'm the only really one of the only people, and I realized like, oh yeah, it's like these are not just the regular, Joe Sixpack can come to this show because it's expensive, and it's like, and I'm like, I don't just like Guns N' Roses or like Metallica, like it's part of my DNA, and that's like why we're here, because we're not just like, we don't kind of like, no, we know every detail of it, we read the notes and we watch the documentaries and we want to understand everything about it. It's not, like I said, it's not just music, it's obsession.
Well, before I let you guys go, one of the things that I've found very interesting about the different circles of friends that I have, it's the same from my musician friends as it is from my military friends. You are some of the most well-traveled people that I've ever met. I think most people, especially in the United States, don't travel as much as maybe people in Europe, where it's a little bit easier to access different countries or whatever. But in all of the touring that you guys have done, is there a place, and I do it because I think this podcast is going to serve as an unofficial travel guide in a way, because the world is getting smaller. And I think people are going to be so excited to get the fuck out of the house and be able to go someplace when the coronavirus finally gets to a manageable place. Can you guys suggest or talk about a place in the world that you went that you loved more than almost anything? And it can be for whatever, the architecture, the music, the food, the wine, the scenery, the music scene, whatever it is, but just a place and like a meal that you had, or just some place where you're like, anybody listening, this should be on your bucket list to go to because I loved it so much.
I'll go. So it's funny, the place I'm talking about is not a place I've played. Just me and my girlfriend went back-to-back years. We loved it so much. It was Iceland, Reykjavik. And they apparently do have a very burgeoning kind of music scene and culture. Like Bjork is from there, and I think Sigur Rós, and I think Coyle, I think is from Iceland. But it's just kind of like the land that time forgot in some ways. The topography is like extremely unique. You go places and you feel like people haven't been there. Only less than 500,000 people live in the entire country. And I want to say like around 200,000 people live in Reykjavik. So it's a city, but it's nighttime, and it's like a certain kind of quiet that you can only get from a place that there's not this type of industry and kind of this bustling nature. And it's they have the northern lights and natural hot springs, and it's just it's really majestic. And we go there, and I'm not a big winter cold guy, but I've only been there in the winter, and there's something I just really love about it, so
yeah, I'm sitting there trying to think. I've been so lucky to go so many places, and we've played in China, we've played in India, pretty amazing to go there with a heavy metal band. I think for me, I really love Australia, and it's not particularly that exotic or anything necessarily. It's just that it's there's kind of a pulse, there's kind of a pace, I guess, to Australia that feels a little more relaxed than what I'm.
They're just happier.
It's just a general kind of ambient happiness and a more relaxed kind of pace to life that I find very appealing in general. I love Perth. I love Melbourne. I really love Australia.
Everything there's trying to kill you.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, to be fair, I haven't been out in the bush, but my experiences there have been just so like Doc's saying, it's just kind of this general sort of like everything's cool kind of vibe. That's good for a guy like me. And then kind of a surprise place for me was Tel Aviv, Israel. I'm not particularly I'm not a part of any organized religion, so there wasn't any sort of connection there. I didn't realize, even though I finished college, I didn't realize that Tel Aviv was like a Mediterranean like beach town. I had no idea the first time I went there. It's gorgeous. And just having been to Jerusalem and felt like all of the kind of sort of energy there, spiritual energy that's with all different religions, all kind of have connections to there. And that combined with just the beauty of the landscape, and we went to the Dead Sea and all that kind of stuff. It was just really like, I was just really moved by even like just the I guess the kind of energy and that level of history, and the sort of just intense spirituality that seems to be everywhere and sort of ingrained into the lifestyle there. So that one is really, I've been there a couple times, and it really, again, not having any particular affiliation to it in terms of an organized sense, just the general feeling, the vibe there was really powerful for me, and it's gorgeous. So that one kind of stuck out for me as well.
We're so lucky to be able to travel, right? Because it's the best education that anybody could really get, especially when we travel as musicians and we connect with people that are other musicians and love music, because you can see a lot of the similarities in humanity and how music connects us. I couldn't really pick one place, but if I had to, I would say Japan, because it was the place that I felt was the most different from the other places that I had been traveling in. And I fell in love when I went there, just the kind of the precision and the, like, when people were, like, the record stores there, like how organized they were and how many different, like, rainbow live bootlegs they would have, and the guitar stores. And so I thought it was amazing. I loved the food, and it was just a beautiful place to be. I will say that, Mark, in Australia, when Helmet went there one time, in Sydney, when Carrie was saying that everything there is trying to kill you, Helmet was staying there, and they told us to stay in our hotel because there was somebody going out on the street of Sydney with an axe.
Oh my God!
Trying to kill
I just
people.
met the snakes.
Yeah, snakes and spiders.
I didn't meet the actual people. I just meant all the
murderers.
creepy crawly stuff that they have.
The people are lovely, except the axe murderer.
And you're like, man, I'm American. I ain't worried about it.
Bro, you don't even know what we got at home.
Yeah,
the axe
whatever.
dude. Don't even worry about the axe dude.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
I was saying Australia is the one place in the world that I fly there and I still feel like I'm in America. But it's just like, what if alternate reality America, where it's like there's no trash on the ground, and everyone's like 17% better looking.
It does feel like, of all the places you go in the world, and I hope your Australian listeners won't take this wrong or whatever, but it does feel like the closest to America anywhere you go is Australia, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, Doc's right. It's just a little bit happier, a lot sort of more well groomed and kept.
It's like, I remember going to South Africa. I saved up for years to go to South Africa. I'd always wanted to go there. And you talk about like everyone being 17% better looking. The culture of South Africa is so diverse. There's so many languages and so many different musical styles. And literally everyone there was beautiful. In one,
Charlize Theron.
But I'm not just talking about like the statuesque blonde Charlize Theron. I'm talking about, like, because I love when I travel, I don't know about you guys, but I love to immerse myself in the culture of, like, I ask 1,000 questions. I'm like a little kid. I want to know how to say things. I want to know what food I should try. Like, I'm just constantly asking questions. And I was meeting people who their grandmother was Zulu, and you know, they spoke, like, the waitress serving me breakfast spoke 5 languages. But I just couldn't believe how literally everyone was just gorgeous. And I'm walking around going, are you kidding me right now? Like, and from what I found out, it is the most genetically diverse country on the planet. And they do a lot of human genetic research there on like evolution and stuff like that. because it's the most diverse country on the planet. And
so they're the next phase of evolution, you're saying?
Or they're just trying to figure out once and for all where the hell we all came from in the first place. You know? But I walked around and I was just like that was a place that I went that I was like, this is kind of the first place that I feel like I would want to come back, like either live there or spend copious amounts of time, because I found it to be such a rich culture in so many different ways. It was completely challenging. It was like you could be listening to 7 different languages in one lunch and trying all of these different foods and the music on the streets. And I also, like we were talking about with music, I also don't understand people that don't love to travel either. It's like, you don't? I don't understand.
It makes you appreciate your home too. I think going away makes you appreciate your home and your dog. Yeah.
Well, it brings it all back full circle to how we started this conversation, is you guys are a bunch of nomads most of the time because of your occupation, and now you're
homebodies.
Home.
Traveling is inherently psychedelic to me, because it's because it kind of just tweaks some basic elements of reality that you're used to, where it's and because of things like flight, like back in the day, it's like you get on a boat, 4 months later gonna be in the new world, right? But now it's 6.5 hours, I'm gonna be in France, and all of a sudden it's just the snap of wrist. It's they speak a different language and the buildings look different, and the you know what I'm saying? It's something about that, just that's just very it is like I think you said, Chris, it's there's something kind of, I say psychedelic because it literally does expand your mind to the world is bigger, there's more, the things I think are normal are just an accident of I happen to be born in this one place and in this one town, and so it's just it's a real advantage.
If only everybody could get a little bit of that perspective that we're so lucky to get, where we can go other places and realize that, wherever we're from is not the center of the universe, and that isn't the the pillar of everything that happens. You know what I mean? You get outside in the world and you realize that there's different ways of doing things, and damn, some of them are better than what we're doing.
Well, and something that's really disappointing happened. There's some bands that we know, I will not name names, who kind of talk shit about going overseas because it's not as convenient or as comfortable. And I think that's a real, character flaw of I don't know. It's okay. I think it's okay to like where you live, but I think it's I think you should embrace uncomfortable. I think you should embrace I have to adjust to this. Not that everything is, the whole world.
Character
the
building.
whole world is shaping itself to accommodate me.
It's growth, right?
I just think it's something you should subject yourself to, like you said, you absorb the whatever indigenous culture is going in there, and that's it's a form.
It is hard to get ice in certain countries, though. You got to admit that, right?
Yeah,
it sure is hard to get ice. I did a solo tour of just a quick week run in the UK this past January, and it was acoustic thing. I had a couple guys with me and a front of house tour manager guy, and he's like, "What do you want on your rider?" I was like, "Put on there that I want ice, and tell them to give me twice as much ice, 3 times as much ice as they think I want." Because sometimes you'll ask for ice, and
everything.
They'll bring you a little cup of, we got your ice. It's no, I need a lot of ice. What am I putting? This is the other thing. I drink, I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink beer. I don't drink wine. I drink unsweetened iced tea all day long. Well, you go to Europe or England or wherever, they don't have iced tea. Yeah. You ask for iced tea, they go, So I ask for tea. I ask for ice. I make the tea. I pour it over ice. That's my thing.
Well,
That's
Chris
all
has
I want.
experience with this because he's in the band with the guy. You got to argue with Gavin.
Right.
Can we get some fucking ice?
So I was fascinated by this idea of ice. I was like, okay, so at one point, unless it was cold outside and it was Arctic, there was no ice, right? And I researched it, and it turned out this one guy or a group of people went to like a cold place and they got a giant chunk of ice and put it on a fucking boat and went around trying to like sell people on ice, and people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it was like they had to like, it was like literally thousands of years, no one ever had a drink with ice in it unless you were in Finland.
Well, maybe all four of us, as a way to make ends meet, should bring the recipe for ice to places that don't have it.
Yeah, right.
Dude, I just imagine a giant block on a boat, and they're like
trying to sell frozen water.
I'm like, how did it last? It doesn't make sense to me, but it's fascinating.
Well, for me, like when I got embedded overseas as a journalist with U.S. troops, like for me, and it changed, like this moment literally changed my life. It's like one of those lines in the sand where like you're one person before it happens and another person after. Is at 1 minute I'm a American female journalist with bright purple hair in Afghanistan, and you get on a plane like what you were saying, Doc, right? And the next minute I'm at Logan Airport in Boston with a Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee, like the Bostonian masshole that I am. And in that moment where my hair didn't matter and I could say whatever I wanted and have that Boston attitude of like, go fuck yourself or whatever, like in that moment, I was like, all it was a plane flight between the kind of woman I can be in that culture and what's capable for me in this culture. And I tell people all the time, like, I don't even know why I bother, buying lottery tickets, because I feel like just being able to be born a woman in the era that I was, in the place that I was, I already won. Because I could have very easily been born a little girl in a place where my, the aspirational ceiling would have been extremely low. No
or you could have been born in America just 100 years ago, and it's a different world,
right. Yeah, that's what I mean. And that moment of that one flight, even though I had the layovers, but that getting up and getting on the plane in Kabul with my final destination of Boston, and literally the first thing I did, because I didn't have access to ice for fucking 3 weeks, was go to Dunkin' Donuts and get an iced coffee. And I have a picture of me at the airport, like no shower, my luggage wrapped in that plastic wrap that they put on it when you travel overseas. And I was just like, this is the best iced coffee
I've never done one interview with you where you didn't bring up Dunkin' Donuts, by the way.
Look.
True and true. No.
She's endorsed.
I wish I were.
It's just Massachusetts through and through.
She's like, what do you think? You're better than me, huh? You think you're better than me?
Guys, I am so grateful for the generosity of your time today. I knew that this was going to be a lot of fun, and I knew that there were going to be so many different answers to the questions and how you guys all look at things, but so many other common fibers that made the three of you similar in so many ways, but all of us in a broader sense the same, because of our love of music and our passion for the music that kind of drives us and inspires us. And so I'm just so thankful that you guys took the time to spend with me today. It really means the world.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Carrie. And Chris, pleasure to meet you, man. I look forward to seeing you out there, out and about. I think we've actually played a festival together, I feel like, but maybe we will again. So.
We definitely will again. I look forward to the future with y'all.
Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure.
Congratulations on your continued success.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm scared as hell.
You're going to do great.
You're the best. You're one of the all-time greats.
It's freaking me out, but we're going to figure it out. And, as long as I can have a fucking iced coffee, I'm good to go.
Dunks.
That feeling of fear means go forward. We got to walk into the fire. That means go embrace the fear.
Oh, God, what a great episode. I hope you loved it as much as I did. Chris Traynor from Bush, Mark Morton from Lamb of God, and Doc Coyle from Bad Wolves. And if you go into the description of this podcast, there is a link to a badass playlist. We talked about a lot of music, and there is just a ton of great stuff linked in the playlist, so make sure you check that out. Huge thanks to Latini Creative Solutions at latinicreative.com and Jumptown Skydiving at jumptown.com for sponsoring this week's podcast. Don't forget, you can always find me on social at Mistress Carrie WAF on Facebook and Instagram, and at Mistress Carrie on Twitter, on YouTube, on Cameo, on TikTok, and now on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Mistress Carrie and get yourself hooked up with the Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass. Join me every Tuesday night at 8:30 Boston time, live for Cocktails in the War Room. And as always, thanks to everybody in the 77 countries that have been checking out the Mistress Carrie podcast. And if you like what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And if you don't mind, hook us up with a 5-star review and leave a comment. You guys rock.
To celebrate joining Pantheon Podcasts, Rock Camp, the podcast, the official podcast of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, is giving away a guitar signed by Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater, Marty Friedman, formerly of Megadeth, and legendary shredder Zakk Wylde, plus our rockstar counselors like Vinny Appice, Monty Pittman, and more. To enter to win, simply follow, rate, and review our podcast on your preferred platform, and that's all you have to do. For more information, go to rockcamp.com/podcast.